my major was sculpture. And so, round things were not ever what attracted me. And not only that, shiny is not my thing either. And while I love and admire a lot of blown work, I think a lot of you know of Dale Chihuly, who everybody who works in glass owes a huge debt of gratitude to Dale, because he's the one who basically opened it up and let the world know about contemporary glass. So.
Okay, great. There are a couple of comments. One person commented that Seattle has or actually I guess Tacoma has a wonderful glass museum.
It does.
Yeah.
And actually Dale Chihuly was instrumental in getting that built. He's from Tacoma. And you can watch teams of artists blow glass there. And glass blowing has become much more than I have said that it is. It can be an extremely sophisticated endeavor. And often what you do is you blow with teams and you can do amazing things.
We had a comment that one of our participants hopes you have solar and a heat pump.
I don't. But it's interesting. I think about that, but when I have my kilns on, they're actually on for a quite short period of time, for the most part. They don't go as high as a full fuse or glass blowing, which is the furnace at glass blowing is over 2000 degrees. And then the furnace has to stay hot all the time. You can't let it cool. And the glory hole, which is where you do all the work, is at about 1900 degrees. So the energy use there is astronomical. And what I do is really relatively mild.
There was a comment too about natural materials becoming such marvelous art. You start with the frits and the powders, and then you have this gorgeous art.
Well, that's been going on forever. Pâte de verre is an ancient medium. It was first developed by the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians. And, that the chemical makeup was slightly different, but the paste and the process, which they did with they didn't have electric furnaces, they didn't have kilns, they had fire. And, they were able to create beautiful, usually beadwork, etc. And the Romans were the ones that developed glass blowing. But they were using fire, with bellows to get it hot. But so, you can, there's a lot of beauty. If anybody ever gets the chance to go to Corning, New York, they have a comprehensive glass museum that starts not only man-made glass, but natural made glass from volcanic eruptions, etc. And it's spectacular, and then you understand kind of all the nuances that glass has had for all these years.
So did you study this type of glass making before you started doing it, or as you were doing it, or
Well,
both?
that will be in my PowerPoint.
Okay, all right.
And I don't know if we should start that now or.
I don't know. I have a question I don't quite understand about Corningware in Corning, New York.
Okay, Corningware is a very specific glass that was able to withstand thermal shock. And Corning, the glass, so that was developed and it became very popular. They made dishes out of it. But Corning labs are scientific labs, and they develop materials for the space industry, for the they're the ones that develop the threads where light just travels infinitely on the thread, and they have flexible glass, you know, all the artists are salivating to get all of this stuff, but it has to go through the scientific community first before it gets available to the artists.
Oh, I didn't know they provided any glass to artists. That's amazing.
Well, after a certain point, glass isn't super secret, or a type of glass isn't so secret or isn't so rare, so that they put it on the general market. And when I say the general market, I'm specifically, you know, certain glass distributors.
Okay. Well, I will make you host again.
All right.
And we haven't had more than one join in the last while.
Okay. I will say, people, if you have during this PowerPoint, which I think is about 20 minutes, if you want to just, if you have any questions during that time, you can just type them to Jan. So Jan, are you going to stop me periodically if you get?
Yeah, I'll do that. And go ahead and just type the questions to everyone so we can all see the questions.
Okay, so should I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm starting with a sculpture that I did as a student at the University of Michigan. I got my BFA with a major in sculpture. And so glass was not a part of my world, except that I was very aware of glass and of stained glass specifically. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my parents would take me to concerts at a place called Hyde's Chapel. And Hyde's Chapel had the most magnificent stained glass windows. And I really should find out who made them, where they're from. I'm sure it was turn of the century stuff. But it was spectacular colors. And while I was totally bored with the music, you know, I could watch the stained glass. So I was aware of that. Also, the other thing that happened as a student, I was a waitress at a restaurant that had original Tiffany lamps. And those were wonderful. And then the restaurant had a fire. And someone stepped in, and this local person said, I can repair these lamps, because if you know anything about stained glass, it's put together with lead channel. And so if you have a fire, the lead melts. And I was pretty impressed with that concept. Oh, you can just put these things back together, or you can put things together or recreate them. So anyhow, it was pretty exciting to me. So I did, after college, I apprenticed to a stained glass studio, an architectural stained glass studio in Denver, where my husband was doing training. And then I struck out on my own, doing site-specific stained glass pieces. And I loved the idea of being able to control the light in a room to, depending on the glass, your eye stops at the glass like at the stones, or your eye sort of travels through like in the water, or it can completely travel through if you leave it clear. So it was, even though it's a flat medium, it creates dimension. But I was still not happy with that ultimately, because I was given glass. I had to choose the glass. I had to cut the glass. I had to put it together. I didn't feel I had full control of it. So I went to California College of Arts and Crafts, now California College of the Arts, to take some graduate courses in glass. They had a glass program. And in this example, I was able to work with vitreous paints, which was painting on the glass with a glass paint that fired on, became part of the glass, could sandblast it off, could form the glass, and started to feel I had more control over my process and my product. However, I have always, I did site-specific work as stained glass, and I have always continued to do site-specific work. So this was one of 8 panels around the office hub at what is now the animal shelter at Lake Elizabeth in Fremont. There are 8 panels, and it's a Canada Goose sequence. And the Canada geese are in residence outside this animal shelter. And so these are about 39 by 39, each of the panels. This is in an imaging facility, and you enter, and then 6 feet away, there's this curved wall. And so the question is, what can you do with this curved wall in an imaging center? So I thought about it, and this is a glass that I don't usually work with. This was a scientific glass, now used, used in the art community. It's called dichroic glass. And the thing about dichroic glass is that the shadows are different colors than the glass itself. So you have to understand the shadows to understand the glass. And I thought that that was appropriate for imaging when you're looking at, whether it's an X-ray or an MRI or a CT, whatever, you have to understand shadows and the thing itself. So that was, so that's fusing. Some of you may remember this. This is also fusing. So it's cutting glass, but it's firing it together to create its own, a single piece. And my granddaughter, when she was 5, had done these drawings that I thought were some of the best things ever. So I wanted to recreate them in an adult medium. And what I found is so much of the time, it's the medium itself that is what people see, and then they can appreciate everything else. So people, this is artwork that on regular tear off paper would be on somebody's refrigerator. But when it's in an adult medium, it can be on a wall. I've done a lot of casting of different kinds. So I've done and I work generally in series. So one of my series has been Mortars and Pestles. And the why of it is, first of all, glass is alchemy. It's the true definition of alchemy, that it changes its properties with heat. It also is an analogy of what we have to do to make alchemy work. It's we have to grind our chores. We have to do them in order to make that alchemy. And it also is a male-female discussion, I guess. So I, have done that. Oops, that was back. Sorry. This one, this pair on the left, the black one is actually pale gray plate glass. And the pale green one is clear plate glass. So when it's cast, it changes its properties. And that, to me, the idea of being able to change your properties with heat is this is the ultimate baking. This was a response of going to Japan. And this is clear. This is also clear plate glass cullet, but it's much thinner than the mortars that you just saw. I was teaching at the time, and I was invited to the Bullseye factory in Portland, which was making compatible glass, which means if glass is compatible glass, it will expand and contract at the same time, so it won't crack in the heat. And I went to the factory, and they were making the frits, and I had been using some frit, but then they were throwing away what they thought was contaminated powder at the end. So they were cutting off the ends of their sheet glass, putting them in the sorting machine grinder, small, medium, large frit, and then there was the powder, and they were throwing the powder away. And I said, please don't throw it away. Let's see what we can do with it. And they actually sent a bunch to my class at Longini, and we started using it. But that's when I started creating these low fire pieces. And this first series is having to do with vessels and relationships, because these are two halves of vessels that aren't exactly alike. And that's why you can see the handles are a little different. And I think of it as a relationship type of thing. So the other thing that I like about these is that they don't hold water. So I didn't want them to hold water. I didn't want them to have a flower in them. So this series kind of grew. These are 3 feet tall, and they're now in the permanent collection of the Triton Museum in Santa Clara.
Mm.
And this is also 3 feet tall. There was a period of time that we were very lucky in that my husband's parents and my parents all lived to, mature years. But we knew that that also meant that we were going to lose them all pretty quickly, which we did. And so how do I express that? As an artist, as a writer, people write poetry or stories about it. As an artist, we create work, visual work about it. So I created this series of, I called it my Falling Leaves series. And the idea of transition and transformation and movement. And I thought leaves were a good analogy. And these leaves are molded from the Magnolia grandiflora, which is the street tree in Fremont. But it's also kind of the quintessential leaf. So you don't think of, oh, that's a Magnolia grandiflora. You think of it, oh, it's a leaf. So that you can think beyond, I am hoping, what each leaf is, but what does this composition try to say? And I was given a fellowship, and the only thing I had to do was have a solo show at the Triton Museum. So I did, and I did all these leaf installations. And because of that, they put me in the rotunda where all the walls were round. So that worked out.
There's some questions. Maybe the best time would be at the end of your leaf series.
Okay, I think there's only one more. So this is leaves going through frames, so kind of the hardware and software of your brain. Your thoughts going through the mainframe. So okay, now we're at the end of that.
Okay. Question about hanging the leaves. So not this one, but the prior ones. How did you hang the leaves? Is there a piece of glass that they're attached to, or are they separately attached to?
Okay, they're not that elegantly attached, but what I used was neodymium magnets. And if anybody knows what a neodymium magnet is, it's the magnets that magicians use. And they're incredibly strong, and they are, I forget what the term is, but you turn them one way and they will repel something, and you turn them the other way and they attract something extremely strongly. And you can use very small magnets to get that. And so I use a metal washer that I can attach to the wall. And then I glue a neodymium magnet onto the back of these. So that's how I did it. I think that there are more elegant ways to attach leaves, but I never got there.
Let's see, there were a couple of comments about the casting. Now, one person said really nice casting. Some of us have seen the animal shelter pieces. There was an earlier question about a piece that was in an imaging center. Was that in Washington Hospital?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
One is hoping that one never sees these things that are behind the doors, where if you're there, you're already a patient.
Yeah, although you have some work in the waiting area for the mammograms at Washington.
Right.
And so
But
some
you're
of
already
us see
getting your
those.
mammogram, which is fortunately for most people an annual thing. It's not, but it's not something that is in a general waiting room. And you'll find that a lot of I've done a number of healthcare pieces and in several hospitals and medical offices, and it's kind of my contribution to healthcare, I guess.
Well,
But
it cheers us up while we're waiting.
well, apparently they've done studies on it, and original artwork is contributes to healing in shorter stays in hospitals.
There's a comment. This is breathtaking science, art, functionality, a reflection of life and community, from Kate.
Oh, thank you.
Very deep. And then a question, how did you get these leaves to look so real?
Well, I molded them from real leaves. And so that the veining was there and the shapes were there. And then let's just put it this way. These are not my first attempts. So it's a process. It's a process. Life is about learning. You can't say I have learned, though every once in a while I think I am so tired of learning. I'd like to just do it and do it right. But life is learning. So that being said, I probably have a couple boxes of leaves that I've rejected.
Oh.
Yeah.
Elena says, I liked the X-ray assemblage because they were lovely colors.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, dichroic glass is fabulous, but it was originally developed to be on the space shuttle to reflect the light from, I guess, the sun. And now it's used, it's used also by the art community. But it's, and it is, so I think it wasn't developed to be beautiful, but using these rare earths that it's coated with, it's beautiful. And that's all natural stuff, So,
well, Michael answered the last question, Michael Rifkind, by saying Susan is really great at her craft.
Well, thank you, Michael. All right, shall we move on? Or is there more?
No, next one is Kate is saying amen to Michael.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, Michael has a fabulous gallery in Texas.
Oh.
Okay, so I was doing all of these things, and if you notice, I was very clear about what colors I wanted where. And what I had was all of these leftovers, because you've got to mix enough color so that you make sure you have enough color, which means you have to mix too much color. And so what you don't see is that when I was after college with a group of people who we had all become vegetarian, we opened a restaurant in Ann Arbor, and I decorated it with quilts that I had gotten from great aunt Edith would have died, and there was a yard sale, and I was collecting these quilts, and they were wonderful. They were beautiful pieces of art. They were just being basically given away, unappreciated. They were taken from remnants of materials or clothes that had gotten holes in them, and then they had been repurposed, the original recycled art, into these beautiful works of art that were also functional. And I thought that, all of a sudden, I can use these and make what I call luminous quilts. Use my leftovers, my remnants. And so this was my first luminous quilt, and it's about 4 feet by 4 feet. But I also wanted to have the idea of transition in it. So, because that's a theme that's gone through my life. And so the transition from dark to light and from one color to another. Continuing this transition. But ultimately, when you're commissioned to do things, you have to mix more colors. So this kind of thing is an ongoing issue, you know, accumulating leftovers. But this was a commission, and trying to see where and how I put my shapes. Like these were slightly more random. They're not perfectly square. They're not the same size. And it gives a different dynamic. And I'm trying to, you know, understand that. I was asked to do a 4 seasons quilt. And this is not the 4 seasons quilt that was the original one of the series. But I decided, you know, 4 seasons, there's not really a beginning and an end. It's a cycle. So you go through that cycle of spring to summer to fall to winter, back to spring. And so I was hoping that the outside would give you that narrative. And the inside is the intensity of the 4 seasons. So I wanted it hung in this way. So this was the original 4 seasons quilt. It's in a home in Arizona. For those of you who have been to the Women's Center at Washington Hospital, this is my harmony quilt. And this has 6 different patterns. And each one of these patterns could be a whole quilt in itself. But when you put them together so that they interact, it becomes a much more dynamic design. And I felt that that spoke to the makeup of our community, which is basically a majority community. And we are more dynamic for that. This is a close-up. So each one of these squares is made up of many pieces that are individually fired and then put together and then refired. So that's my process. For this, for many years, I did have an assistant, by the way, because this takes time. This is in a waiting room, a medical waiting room, and I was asked to make something as calm as possible. So I was for me, looking at the sunset over water is probably the most calming thing for me. So this is what I did. And I started doing these strips to make the image. And this was for someone who wanted a reminiscence of their trip to the Grand Canyon. But again, I found that the strips started talking to me. I really liked that. I was invited to a residency in northern Scotland, Caithness, and it was a dramatic place. There is a glass school there, and it's run by the Scottish Arts Council, trying to rehabilitate this very depopulated area. And they have these black slate cliffs, hundreds of feet high, looking out over the North Sea. And then the sky when I was there, and I guess this is the summer sky, all these roiling clouds. But every once in a while, there's a breakthrough and you can see beyond the clouds. And here it's a little hard to see, but there's pink right here. And so this was like about 11:30 at night because I was there in the summer. It doesn't, sun sets, 11:30, 12 at night, and comes back up at 3:30 or 4 in the morning.
This is probably a good time to ask. Question is, does the Pâte de Verre always start with strips when you do it?
No, like the leaves were our Pâte de Verre.
Okay.
So no.
Okay, thanks.
And no, it's just that something that I'm enjoying doing right now. Everybody does their own thing. So this was this particular area of Northern Scotland became populated in the clearances, which was between 750 and 850, when the landlords in the inland decided that they had better use for the land than their tenant farmers, and they literally burned them out. And some of them went over to Nova Scotia, which is Gaelic for New Scotland. And some of them went over to this Caithness coast, and they had to decide what to do. They'd been farmers, and they were looking at this sea and deciding, making decisions. And the decisions were going to become herring fishermen. And they had a very productive community, and for over 100 years. So is there something wrong with my screen? Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, something came up with that. So you see the little houses here because they were built of that same slate. They were just part of the land, and they were just kind of plopped on this slate landscape, treeless. Sometimes at the edge of a cliff, sometimes down by the water. It was very dramatic, very windswept. People had to really make decisions to stay there. And I was very admiring of them. When I was there, I never got out of Pullertech. The young women who were helping us, the locals, were in short sleeves. Okay. I was asked to do a quilt in out of the idea of a garden. So this is what I came up with. And now I'm not finding, okay. And then someone else saw that and liked the design that I had, but wanted it in the strips. So this is more of a reflection, but I use that same basic design. But depending on how one does it, it looks very different. I was asked to do some work for the new tower at Highland Hospital in Oakland. And I was given the med-surg floor, which is the 10th floor, and nobody will ever be able to see this who doesn't go up there as a patient. So they asked, they went through all my stuff. They asked for sunrise, sunset. And that makes sense because you're making some big changes when you're on the med-surg floor. So this is sunrise, this is sunset. And then I had a lot of leftover strips. So what do I do? Well, let's find out. And so this was the beginning of this vessel series. This was the influence. I do a lot of, I'm influenced by sunrises and sunsets. They never get old. But I'm also influenced by my travels, and this is from the Galapagos. And this is from Newport Beach. Took a lot of pictures of surfing, of waves. My son is a surfer down there, so. And then I decided to, so I have lost an image, and maybe it'll come up later. But I decided with all my leftovers, I was going to make them into strips. So I made a ton of strips. And then what am I going to do with them? I decided to go back to quilting, but do it in a different way. So I'm doing it on edge. And it's funny how I started to do the outsides. And then as you get closer and closer, like it's hard to fit things in and you just start stuffing stuff in. And I thought, well, that's a really good analogy for my life. You know, I think I know where I'm going and I'm really structured, but by the time the end comes, it's like, let's just make it work. So that was my first one. This is one that I'm doing now. It's about 20 inches by 44 at this point. But I've kind of let myself say, I don't know if or when it will ever end. So this is just something that I'm allowing to grow, but it's that same principle.
You're the Mrs. Winchester of glass.
Yes. Right now, I am just starting on a commission, 2 installations for the Masonic Home in Union City. They have a new facility. This one is for memory care, and it's a 10-foot ceiling, and I superimposed my design on it, on where it would go, and so I could see how big it was going to be, et cetera. And we decided to go pretty realistic because these are people who, they remember Mission Peak. They know Mission Peak. They remember Mission Peak. It gives them a sense of being there and being outside. So we decided that we would go more realistic. And then this one is 6 feet by 6 feet, and that's going to go upstairs on a 16-foot wall in the high level assisted living. So they're very similar, but this one is the spring as things are turning golden. And this one is for the harvest moon. And I have a lot of pictures of the harvest moon in the fall. That is the full moon that comes up before sunset. So you get the hills, you get the reflection, the real gold in the hills, and you get the full moon. So that's where I'm going with that. But I needed to figure out, okay, I want to be more realistic. So what does that mean? So I'm going to just show you kind of my building blocks here. I do glass sketches. So I'm doing a bunch of elements here and starting to put them together. And so this was my glass sketch. It's about 15 inches high, but now I know where I'm going. So, you know, I'm working with the sky a little differently than I'm working with the hills, and the greenery is different than the water. So I just needed to understand for myself where I'm going. And, but I continue to be inspired by nature. Has the best canvas of all. So that is it. So does anyone have any questions? I see Jan is on the phone. Let's see. Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Susan, I'm just blown away. I am really, glass has always been very special. I have a nephew that's a glass blower and I've always tracked the glass, but I'm just amazed at the growth, the science, all the stuff that goes behind it, the artistry. Wow. Very
Thank you. You know, when I was teaching at Ohlone, some of my best students were engineers that were taking hiatus because they understood all of this stuff. And in fact, Nancy Ruskin's husband, Dan, was a NASA engineer and
oh, I wondered. I know she's a big time glass lover.
Yes, and
Wow.
so Dan and I would talk about geeky things like coefficients of expansion and stuff like that.
So did you
But
start
it
out with
allowed
art
him,
history?
his understanding of this stuff allowed him to do amazing work.
Oh, wow.
So
I get it. I mean, I don't personally get the science end of it, but I get the respect for it because it's like a whole nother toolbox no one else has. I love it.
well,
Very
thank
special.
you, thank you. But I have to say that glass is a very seductive medium, and even if you don't produce it, people are attracted to it. It's beautiful.
Mhm.
And what I like about it is the way I work, it isn't shiny, but the light gets stuck in there and then gets thrown back out, so it glows.
It's
I like
all
that.
about the light. I agree with you. It's all about
And
the light.
but everybody has some special thing that they do. I do the cheap shot. I can do something that everybody thinks is so beautiful, but you know, everybody, I mean, what's more important than being a teacher and helping our children, or you know, or being a
Well, you
parent,
keep giving back to the community too, which I
or
love.
giving back to the community in any way. I mean, so we all have our special gifts, and I want people to know that, to remember that you all have your special gifts. I just have one that people see.
Now, did you make a decision that you're gonna, I mean, how much time do you spend on this? Is it like a season of life where you go in and out of it? Or is it like X number of hours a week I'm going to dedicate to this? I mean, how do you plan your life around this? Look, this is
It's
really
project
intensive.
driven. It's project driven. So like now I'm doing these large installations for the Masonic home. And so, you know, I've,
Oh, up on the
in
hill.
my head, I've said, okay, I have to get this much done. You know, there's a whole lot of fusing that has to go on, a whole lot of kiln work. So I know that I have to get a certain amount done every day, or enough to put in every day. So
Okay, I have a question to
yes.
translate pot de verre from the French.
Paste of glass.
Ah,
So
And there are quite a few comments about how wonderful this has been and how much people like your glass, and that the pieces you do are amazing.
well,
One
thank
after
you.
another of those.
Well, thank you. You know, and like I said, it's a cheap shot because glass is amazing. And because I was so attracted to it, that was why I chose it as my medium. So, you know, I'm an art major, and a lot of it was just finding my medium. And once you find your medium, then that's it, you know. And life has been good to me, and my work has centered around art, if not glass itself, you know, whether it's teaching or being an administrator, working with the city to do public art, to be an administrator for public art. I just think that it's really important. So it all kind of meshes together.
Something I noticed is the longer I look at your pieces, especially the ones that are like a kind of landscape, the more I see.
Thank you.
Things start to appear and keep appearing for me. I imagine that's true for probably everybody.
Well, thank you. You know, I think that, again, when I put, that's one of the reasons why I use multiple elements. They all kind of interact and speak to each other and have something that has much more complexity for me than some single piece. So, you know, that's what I do and how I try to grow things.
There are fewer people on now, and I'm wondering if anybody would like to unmute and ask a question. Just go ahead and unmute and ask.
Okay, I just wanted to know more about what specifically makes this process, you know, what as opposed to a different process in glass. Is it just the powders, or what else about this is the pâte de verre or pâte de verre?
Well, since it's called paste of glass, yes, using powders in a binder to create a form. But, you know, glass can do or be anything. So that's it. That's the definition of this specific process. Now, a lot of pâte de verre is in a mold and fired to a higher temperature, so it's a solid piece, but it still has this sense of glow as opposed to shine.
Right. There was a question I missed earlier.
Hi, Vaishali.
Does the glass tend to stick to the molds?
So the mold that I use is a plaster silica mix, and that mix pretty much falls away. Well, doesn't fall away, but you can take it off pretty easily, and then you wash it off. But it does sometimes take a certain amount of polishing to get it off. But I'm thinking of like my my mortars and pestles, which are completely, you know, that's a high fire casting. The lower fire molds that are the pâte de verre, the low fire pâte de verre that I do, things don't stick that much. And so a lot of it has to do with the temperature.
Okay. Vaishali had a question.
Yeah. So Susan, I wanted to know, when you mix your colors, do you use the frit like the O1 or the O2 straight from the jar, or you use clear and then mix powders in it to make your colors?
I usually use mostly clear and with powders to, but again, it depends. If I use 100% powder, it's very strong, much stronger than the frit. So that if you use a combination of frit and powder, it makes it stronger than just the frit.
Right.
And it also gives the color, but the clear gives the glow more because the powder won't give a glow. I sometimes use some colored frit too, but most of the time I use mostly or all clear as my #1 frit.
And you use that, is that the O1 or is
Yeah,
it
the
called
01.
The
The
01.
01 and then the 08 for
Oh,
the
wait, the powder. Okay, great.
yeah,
Nice to
use
see
it.
you.
I want to
Often.
see it. I want to see it, Vaishali.
Yeah, soon, I hope.
Okay. Anybody else? Kate?
Yeah, so if we were to say launch a glass community, not everybody has kilns and equipment and expertise. If we were to launch this in Fremont, what would you say? Where would we base it? How could we do this? Is it the community college? Is it the artists themselves? What would you recommend?
Well, I mean, we had a really lovely community. Vaishali was part of that at Ohlone.
Okay.
I don't know if there is a glass program there anymore. When I left, Carol Lawton took it over, and then she had to leave. And it was also taken over by an artist named Roald Hartman, who was a sculptor, but I don't know, especially in these last couple of years, there's certain things you can't do via Zoom. Like you can't, it's hard to make.
Yeah,
glass
it has
via
to be in
Zoom.
person.
So this may have been a program that collapsed. I heard that the program at California College of the Arts is collapsing too, that they're
Oh,
moving their facility to, they're moving everything to San Francisco from Oakland, and that they're not taking the glass program with it.
It's probably the intensity of the equipment or the
It's
events.
equipment intensive. It is
Expensive.
it's a very expensive program to run, especially if you're talking about blowing, which, like I said, that's just extremely expensive. Even back in the day, we were at Bay Area Glass Institute, we were spending multiple thousands of dollars a month on the bill, on the
Tower, yeah. So it really will take a sponsorship.
right. Well, you know,
basically, a facility.
glass kiln work, not casting, because casting can take weeks in a kiln. So like what I do is one of the least kiln intensive and electric intensive ways of working with glass. But you know, you can also do lamp working. And in Fremont, we have Shirley Cook, who is a bead worker who's very good. But a lot of it, Kate, is the facility. Is one of the things
It has to be
that I want to say, and again, you know, it takes a village. You can't do things in a vacuum. And I have to thank my husband, who's been my greatest supporter. And I had rented a commercial studio. When I found out I was pregnant with twins, we built a studio behind the house because I knew I wasn't going to get to that commercial studio. And to have a studio where you don't have to put things away, where you can have a project that can continue for a long time, that makes a huge, huge difference. And so what we would need would be a dedicated space where people, you know, that is not shared with any other medium. Things don't have to be put away.
right.
Oh, gosh, what an art form. Inspiring.
It's a little bit of an industrial art form.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I love about it. Okay, well, we're
It's
gonna
beautiful.
have to find some sponsors in space.
There you go. Well, I have to say, when I was teaching, one of the things that really made me happy was when a student would say, I asked my husband for a tile saw for Christmas, you know, or a sandblaster or a kiln. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
Well,
that was very gratifying to me.
of course you would. Susan, would you mind running the video again that you ran at the beginning, another 2 minutes?
Let me see if I can do it.
Like I got it.
Okay,
Okay, so I have to be host, right?
absolutely. I'm glad you reminded me.
Now I have to see if I can find it, but I will try. Okay, I'm the host now. Okay, let me see if I can do something. Okay,
Yep, we still have 21 participants and
okay.
a few might
Okay,
have.
so no, but let me,
Oh,
okay,
there
here
you
we
are.
go.
Wow, isn't time lapse wonderful?
It is, so yeah. And so here's my little guy that I just made last week for you guys.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I mean, I had to make a video.
Right, so you needed to make something.
Needed to make something, yes.
Okay, well, we'll take the video, send it to Lisa to put on the website.
Okay.
And oh, this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you again for inviting me, and thank you everyone for participating and staying all this time. And I hope that you had a good time. And if any questions come up after the fact, how will you let me know?
Maybe email you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I can put that in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan. This was
Thank
just
you.
amazing.
Well, thank
You
you.
are amazing.
you know, we all do what we do. That's what people, it's just that I do something that people gawk at.
Susan, your work is gorgeous.
Thank you, sweetie. So good to see you.
It's good to see
My
you
cousin.
too.
Well, it's fun. It's fun. And if we, you know, that's what life is about. And at each point that I'm doing something, I realize, I would hate myself if I didn't try this. So, you know, that's been my modus operandum, is like, when I get to the point of feeling like I'm going to hate myself if I don't try this, then I try something new. So that's what we should all do, right?
Absolutely. That's what keeps our brains and ourselves young.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, is there any other comment or question before we sign off? Well, I want to
One
thank
other thing.
also, yes,
Just
Judy?
one other thing. Thank you so much, Jan and
Yes.
Elena, for bringing this to us.
Yeah, well, this was just wonderful. This was a great experience. And I just wish that the presentation could have lasted longer. I'd like to see every piece you ever made, but
Oh, no, no.
I
no.
know that would be a little tough. So,
But, I have to say that Jan, you don't realize this, but Jan spent probably 4 hours with me yesterday trying to figure out how we were going to get all of this to work technically.
oh, and then Lisa was. a
And
huge-
Lisa, that was another couple hours, yeah.
She bailed us out. Okay, I'm going to end this then. And thank you again.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
what a fun morning this was.
Hey, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.